tonight we have the privilege, nay, the responsibility, uh, to listen attentively to Marcus Ford, uh, one of the first professors in this country, uh, maybe in every country, who knows? We have to do that research, to teach courses in sustainability and to develop an environmental humanities program. Since early in his teaching career, Dr. Ford has held that the most important thing that we can learn is how to live sustainably and justly within the bounds of the natural world. He has taught sustainability studies at the undergraduate and graduate levels and is an advocate for education that prepares people to actively participate in shaping their communities. He is the author of the groundbreaking book, Beyond the Modern University, as well as many other books and articles on higher education, process thought, and is also the founder of Flagstaff College, a communiversity. Is that the right word? Yeah. So, anyways, with that, take it away, Marcus Ford.
Thank you all for enduring, persisting here. It's been a long day. And let me just say a couple of things before I get started. One thing is I usually avoid conferences and don't enjoy them. This has been very helpful for me on many different levels that I've been trying. Unlike Cliff Cobb, I tend to be optimistic, but I optimistic. I think by avoiding certain hard truths about reality, which is not necessarily a good characteristic. And I've been avoiding thinking very much about artificial intelligence, and I'm glad now to have that gloomy scenario on my radar. I think it's very important. I modified. This is a long way. Well, it's a long way of doing a couple of things, but it's a long way of saying I have a very crude PowerPoint because I modified it to include what Cliff shared with us this morning. So I'm very grateful for that. And I just came from an excellent session on adult learning communities and education for eco-civilization and stuff. So I'm really glad to be at this conference. And I hope what I have to say is a minor contribution in some way to this otherwise fabulous gathering of people and ideas. So the question I have been asking myself for a long time is it too late to reform higher education? And I put a picture of the Claremont colleges up there, not because they're especially bad or in need of reform, but it seems like it'd be helpful to locate it. If we're at Laverne, I'd put up a picture of Laverne. If we were at San Diego State or University of Arizona, I'd put up a picture there. Because a lot of times when we talk about reforming things, we don't mean like where we are, we mean reforming things out there. So, nothing, I just wanted to explain why the Claremont colleges. So let me get going here. So I have three answers or four answers to my question. The first is yes, it's too late to reform higher education. And I'm pretty serious about that. There's more to it than that, but that is, a very real possibility that I want to explore. The other one is no, it's not too late. And the third one, how would I know? And then this is the one I'm going with, all of the above. That in some ways it's clearly too late, in other ways it's not. And we have to both try to reform higher education at the same time we're looking for the next step for what happens after it fails. That I really don't know what's going to happen. And so I think because we don't really have a planet B, this is the only planet, we should have multiple strategies for surviving on this one. And the first strategy is to reform the kinds of institutions we have in place and hope that we have enough time for that to happen and take effect. The other is to be also planning for the alternative. But so how do we reform it, and reform it in what ways and what mechanism? So the other night, David Orr said no one should graduate from college without understanding how the world works. I think we can all agree with that. I think he knows that it's more than just how it works. It's like, what is the current state of the world? How did it come into being? Who's responsible? What are the alternatives? It's a much more complicated thing than just how the world works. And this morning, Cliff, I don't know if he actually said this, but the implication was no one should graduate from college without, having a real understanding of the negative and dark possibilities of artificial intelligence. It seems like these are two really big crises that we have. And from my perspective, it'd be a mistake to focus on one or the other, though, maybe one's more eminent than the other. But it seems like these are at least two big issues that we have to make sure our young people, our college students, have some grasp of. And so how do you do that? And this might seem like an unlikely solution to anything, but in the undergraduate curriculum, almost everywhere, there's the academic major and there's general education. And the academic major is sort of like sacred ground, and you can't touch that because there are outside accrediting agencies and because there are faculty that have devoted their lives to those disciplines and those subjects, and there are students who are committed to that. So I think greening the curriculum was never likely to work because people are committed to their disciplinary ways of thinking. And general education is about 25% of a student's education. And it seems like that is the one part of the curriculum that nobody's tenured in general education. There is no degree in general education. So that's like the one part of the curriculum that you might actually be able to affect change in. And actually, most students hate general education, which in some ways is an opportunity. They're classes that they have to take, and quite often they're advised to get them out of the way early, which is not the most encouraging twist on general education. So my proposal is that we replace the distributional model of of general studies. The most common form, it's almost universal, is you have to take 2 science courses. It can be any 2 science courses, but you have to have 2 science courses, 2 social science courses, 2 humanities courses, and then some other, kind of random things. But usually they're along strictly disciplinary lines, and there's no coherence. You could take, for your humanities requirement, you could take, French literature or, Western civilization or, just anything that's in the humanities block. And for your science course, it could be geology, chemistry. Almost everyone takes biology, but you could take astronomy instead and never know anything about the planet you live on. So my idea is, you could replace that one part of the curriculum with 10, 30 hours of kind of coordinated courses. So if you're doing a general education around the common good, you could have 4 or 5 courses that dealt with climate change and 4 or 5 courses that are dealing with AI. And so these, just to quickly, like I said, these are just notes to myself. It's not it's obvious what's up, what any of that means. But I mean, you can have a course on climate change that focus on climate change at the particular location where the students and faculty were. How is the climate changing here in Claremont or here in Flagstaff or here in wherever the school is? And what are the effects and what are the local causes and what are the local resources and what are the local opportunities and challenges and stuff, but it'd be a very localized sort of course. Then you could have another course on the global, like the last 200 years of climate change. How did it come about? And who's responsible for it and who's impacted by it and what kind of solutions are available on a global level and who pays for those solutions, and a whole series of questions around climate change on that wider level. You could have a course on how our thinking shapes our activity in the world and how worldviews have contributed to climate change, or in some cases haven't contributed to it. And you could have a course on technologies, like what are the opportunities, what are the dangers, what are the unintended consequences, who's going to pay for them, who's going to benefit from them, those kinds of questions, and similar questions about artificial intelligence and what does it mean for us as human beings living in community, or what does it mean in terms of fighting wars and those kinds of things. But instead of just randomly taking courses in these blocks, you would have courses that were related to each other on topics of great importance to all of us. So here are some common characteristics of those courses. They'd all deal with some kind of existential problem. They would be non-anthropocentric, historical, transdisciplinary, humanistic, and solution-oriented. And I think the solution-oriented is very important because it's in some ways irresponsible to simply tell students to talk with students about the problems without also talking about solutions. And these solutions have to be, there's an ethical dimension to these solutions. They're real solutions that affect real people's lives, and there are better and worse solutions. And that has to be a part of the curriculum. So you can't do this in a scientific, value neutral kind of way. So this solution, and I'll speed up. I was afraid I was going to be too short. Now I'm worried about the other problem. The thing about this solution, on the one hand, it's a compromise. It's only affecting 25% of the curriculum. It's leaving everything else in place. It may not be enough, even if people were to institute it, which they may not, but even if they did, it may not be enough. On the other hand, it's a kind of radical proposal because it runs against the grain of the university to be talking about big problems and be talking about them in a non-value neutral kind of way. That's a long way of saying in a value-oriented sort of way. So it's not, it is both a compromise and radical at the same time. It's traditional in a way that I'm not going to go into. And then obviously it might not be enough. So that does speak for itself. So the other possibility is that it really is too late to reform higher education. If the timescale with the AI problem is right, even if the timescale with climate change is right, we don't have a lot of time. And if anyone, I assume lots of you have experience with university and curriculum reform, even if it was institutionalized this afternoon, it would take 3 years to go into effect. And it could not be institutionalized without a 5-year discussion. And then it would take 3 years to get into effect. So universities are not known for moving quickly. They kind of give geological time a bad name. Um, so there are some interesting examples of small institutions that aren't universities, that are learning communities that I think are kind of helpful. And I'll just go through these again pretty quickly because you might know of some of these. They're not all that well known, so I'll spend a little bit of time on them. But the oldest of those is Deep Springs College, which is a rather remarkable little school because it's over 100 and whatever the math is, 108 years old. And it has 26 students. And it started with 26 students, and its goal is to have 26 students. So unlike other universities, I think Harvard started with 8, and they're considerably higher than that now. Uh, but most universities, no matter how big they are, they have a goal of growing. And L.L. Nunn, who founded this, said that a real learning community of young people, young men in this case, needed to be small. And it's on a ranch in Eastern California. That always kind of blows my mind. I always think of California as being north and south and not having any width, but it's over by Nevada, and it's on a working ranch. And his other innovative idea, besides it should be small, is that academics should be integrated with work and governance. So the students, in a sense, run the school. That's not entirely true, but they run a lot of the school, and then they work on the ranch. And he says the way to help young people become adults is to give them adult responsibilities and to, in a sense, hold them accountable for their failures. And so it's a very traditional school in the sense that their curriculum, they might study algebra or college algebra or calculus or Western history or Kant or whatever. So the curriculum's not very innovative. This is a 2-year school. They all transfer. They have about a 99% graduation rate. It's also a very elite school. They're almost all national merit scholars and stuff. But it's small, it's innovative, and it's highly successful. The Highlander Folk School was founded in 1937 by Miles Horton. And to my mind, this is also a remarkable institution. It was modeled after the Danish folk schools. And the idea is you work with people in their community to maintain their culture and to help them in the ways they need to be helped. And so at that time, in that location, it had an enormous focus on labor rights and unions and things. In the 50s, it shifted over to race. But this little institution has probably done more to promote racial justice in the United States than all the public universities and private universities combined. So they've done an enormous amount of good in the world, and they're small and unaccredited. And it's really an inspiring example of what education can be and do. Um, this is a relatively new communiversity. The term communiversity is kind of up for grabs. Sandra and I are trying to give it a particular meaning that is in alignment really with the um, Sweetwater folks. Some people use communiversity to mean simply work training. Uh, this is saying, how can we build community, in community, promote community, learn about community? These people are doing on the south side of Chicago and having some success. The Center for Leadership in Harlem is also, they use the term communiversity in a way that we approve of. So we're trying to promote their work too. And again, it's what is the knowledge needed in this community to help people in this community? And then there's Flagstaff Communiversity. And I will only say a few words about it, even though I could talk for a longer time about it. So the idea here is that the community needs to understand the world in which we live. And most of the participants, students, if you will, in the community are adults. Many of them have advanced degrees. Many of them are very knowledgeable. Not all of them. Some are young and some have no degrees. But it's a mix of people trying to figure out these very complicated issues that are ours to deal with and what we can do on a local level to make some headway against these very complicated issues. So we've done reading action groups and film series and workshops and various projects. And it has been very satisfying work, and it has resulted in some things that give me hope. I mean, there's hope is hard to come by, as we all know. But on a local level, you can make a difference. And if you were doing lots of good things in lots of localities, that would give lots of hope. So again, I can talk more about this at some other time, but it's Friday afternoon, it's 5:30. So common attributes, they're small, they're human scale, unaccredited, flexible, and innovative. Um, Possibility for all of the above. I don't want to give up on the possibility that we could really reform our existing institutions. Um, I don't know if we can or not, but I think it's dangerous to give up. And I think it gives kind of a free pass to people who are in an accredited existing institution to say, oh, well, we can't reform it. I think if that is where you're located, I think if you have power in that context, then it's worth a try to reform them. It's worth making the case. It's not obvious to me. It seems unlikely, highly unlikely, that we could transform all existing institutions. That I wouldn't bet a nickel on. But could this college or that college or that college or that university radically change its uh, general education thing? I think it's probably possible that some school somewhere, and maybe a couple of schools and a couple of locations, could actually make a major reform in their general education requirement. I think that's a possibility. So I don't want to just say, it's not going to happen. It is certainly possible to create these adult learning communities, these alternative colleges, these communiversities elsewhere. I know it's possible because we've done it and other people have done it. So that's a very real possibility. And it seems to me that there's a lot of good that can come from that, even if universities reform themselves, even if they are, if civilization somehow dodges all these problems or goes on and our universities go on, there's still a real value in these small gatherings around local issues and built solving local problems on a local level. And then a third possibility that I just want to throw out there, John Cobb liked to talk about us as being individuals and communities of communities of communities. We could have a community of communiversities and a community of communities of communiversities. Gets harder and harder to say, but you could have something like that, so that the new learning center in Harlem and Flagstaff College and Deep Springs and all these various small institutions form networks where people could go from one to the other, or that kind of stuff. That seems like a real possibility that could bring, could enrich these individual communities by linking themselves with other small universities elsewhere. So that seems a real possibility. So the real answer to, is it too late to reform higher education? The theological answer is that it's never too late to do the right thing, whether it works or not. That it seems like we have to figure out, what is it? What can we do in regards to education that needs to be done? And will it work? Who knows? But should you give it a try? Should you kind of give it your all? I think that's really the right answer to whether or not it's too late to reform higher education. There is no alternative. So thank you very much.